few clouds with a high of 85.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Goldilocks, offering smart security systems to homes and businesses. Call Goldilocks at 708-889-5600.
Now, from The Signature, a division of Esquire Bank Studios.
Insert Democrat socialist here.
Runs the Democratic House floor for 30 plus years running.
That sounds like Dan.
He's promising this and he's stealing that.
Welcome back
Where can you get that
to Chicago's Morning Answer with John Anthony filling in for Dan Prof. Is that Dan Prof singing? If you synthesize his voice and oh, Dan can't sing. I'm just joking. I know Dan can't sing. I've heard Dan and Amy try to serenade each other, and it was probably some of the worst sound that I think I've heard in a very long time. But our next guest, he spent years examining the numbers of Illinois politicians would often prefer not to discuss, the true health of what's happening in the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois. Mark Glennon is the founder and executive editor of Wirepoints. It's a Illinois-based research, commentary, and news organizations focused on government, finance, public policy, and the state's economy. Before founding Wirepoints, Mark worked as an attorney and venture capital investor. He earned degrees in economics and political science from Northwestern University. So he knows he knows a little bit about what he's talking about, and his law degree from the University of Minnesota Law School. Wirepoints is my go-to for information, and I report a lot of what they report because it's true, it's factual, and there's no hedging or even trying to figure out if what they're saying is correct, because it is. Mark Glennon, welcome to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Prof.
Hey, John, thanks for having me, and nice to meet you.
Yeah, well, we've met a few times, Mark, quite a few times. But Mark, you see all these people jumping in the race to be the next mayor of the city of Chicago, and you keep hearing. I think every last one of them that have jumped in, and they've had this message that what's happening in the city of Chicago, what's happening in the state of Illinois is unfair, and people can't survive. But Mark, when politicians discuss Chicago finances, they often describe the problem as a difficult budget year or a temporary revenue shortage. I think you've described something far more serious. What is the honest financial condition of the city of Chicago?
It's awful, and the trajectory is undeniable that it's going to get worse. The primary problem is that pension obligation, which grows and grows and eats our lunch out of the budget every year. There's a fundamental question of whether Chicago has a financial model that works. Even if you put in competent people into all the key positions, what could they do? I've often put down the challenge saying, show me just some rough numbers, a back of the envelope plan for setting this straight, making us competitive again in terms of tax load and quality of service. Nobody ever takes up that challenge. I'm concerned that there is no such plan, and this is like watching a train wreck in process, and that's, I hate to be that pessimistic, but that's what I see.
Now, I'm so glad you brought up the unfunded pension liability, which I believe it was estimated at approximately $36 billion, I believe. Now, you've argued that some of the pension buyout proposals being discussed would largely move debt from one column to another instead of eliminating it. Explain to the listeners how a pension buyout can be presented as reform while also failing to reduce the underlying burden.
Yeah, when you take a buyout, they estimate the present value of all the future income you're going to get, and they discount that to represent the fact that $1 30 years from now is not the same as $1 today. So you do get there's a big discount taken off of even that. You get a cash payment for the value of all that future income, for giving up all that future income. The question is whether that's a fair price. And we really don't know because no one's ever presented a true analysis of this. So, yeah, it reduces the unfunded pension liability when you do that. If somebody takes a buyout, that erases some of the debt owed by the pension to the pensioner. But the city has to pay for that, or the state, if the state is doing it. And they do that by borrowing money.
Yeah.
So you add a debt onto the other side. You have to pay interest on that. It's not clear that this doesn't work. It might work, but what's for sure is that the benefit of this is exaggerated. You often see politicians and the press simply citing that reduction in the unfunded liability that results. And that's not a true measure of the result. That's just looking at half of the equation because you got to pay for it.
Right.
And
You know, back in 2013, I actually served in the General Assembly, and we bore witness what happened in Detroit. And the very next day, we passed the pension restructuring plan, and it was shot down at the Supreme Court. But when you look at what's happening, I joined as a chief co-sponsor a Chapter 9 solvency for the city for the cities who are especially like the city of Chicago. Are we nearing a time where you think? I mean, you look at $36 billion in unfunded pension debt liability. I believe in the state is over. Close to $200 billion, or just a little under $200 billion in their unfunded pension debt liability. What are your thoughts on this Chapter 9 bankruptcy? Doesn't mean that they don't have to pay their bills. There's just a restructuring. Would that help a place like the city of Chicago?
Great question, and there's 2 points on that. Number one, for sure, the state ought to authorize that for many reasons. I testified along with my partner in Springfield on perhaps it was your legislation suggesting that it would put a lot of discipline into the process that we need. But you don't know for sure whether that would even help Chicago. I mean, could bankruptcy solve Chicago's problems? Well, you have to have a viable restructuring plan, which goes exactly to my earlier point of what is that plan. You know, with these pensions so underfunded, you're not just going to slash these pensions down to 28%, whatever their funding level is right now. That would throw the pensioners out on the street. Maybe you can make some fair adjustments to the pensions. Bankruptcy allows that. Detroit did it. That gave them a fresh start. But Detroit had a lot of things going for it that we do not have, including they happened to discover $1 billion in cash value in an art museum that they had, that went a long way to making their reorganization plan work. They restructured their school system by basically shutting down the old one and creating a new one, which is something I wish we'd do as well. And they had an excellent emergency manager and an excellent judge. So they had things going for them. And most importantly, too, we've been selling off assets to pay our bills, selling off body parts. Specifically, the city of Chicago sold the value of its future sales tax income in order to pay for borrowing, pay for bonds. So that's money's not available. That'll probably hold up in bankruptcy too. That money's not available to put into a reorganization plan.
Now, also Detroit or Michigan didn't have a constitutional protection for their pensions also. So I think that also helped them in a lot of ways. But you just mentioned the bond market. Now, you've warned that the bond market signals, they reveal more about Chicago's condition than political speeches or budget presentation. What is the bond market telling us about Chicago that City Hall is not, and what specific warning signs should ordinary taxpayers watch for?
Yeah, technically, if you get into it, you look at the spread between the market rate of interest that the Chicago bonds are trading on compared to other bonds. So that's, of course, has been widening. I don't know what that spread is off the top of my head right now. But also even the rating agencies have come down recently and gotten stricter on Chicago. They're starting to wake up to this. They've been notoriously late to identifying crises when they arise. but there's a good op-ed by a debt expert in the Center Square that we have posted at Wirepoints right now, explaining that and detailing it. So, it's very troubling, and Chicago's not going to default immediately on its bonds, I don't think. So there's no immediate concern, but, in the longer term or even the intermediate term, it's certainly a concern. My experience from debt workouts and everything is to address the problem fast and decisively. If you talk to people who have had experience with it, they'll say the first thing you do is stop paying interest on the bonds. That'll get people's attention. You'll start getting some action in negotiating better terms with some of the city's creditors.
Well, that's a really good point. And you guys, I saw this article where you guys were talking about Illinois is losing its future, and the out-migration, or as former Representative Mark Batnick used to call it the brain drain, because we lose a lot of our young and brightest to other states. Who is leaving, and why does that departure matter so much to the future of not just Chicago but the state of Illinois?
Well, they had so much vibrancy to a city. One of the things that is still working to a pretty good extent is the startup community here, but we've got a lot of competition all around the country. It's not just a Silicon Valley anymore, but many cities now have very good startup communities, and obviously those people, young people with good future incomes, are key to adding a lot, and they have kids. It adds all kinds of intangible value to a community. You see that in Texas, Tennessee, and other places. It's just an entirely different spirit that permeates the place, and we are losing that. Those young college people, and we got a lot of graduates here. That's one advantage we have, is good people coming out of good schools. But they're not sticking around here. We've had articles posted earlier about that brain drain, and it's true.
Yeah, if you're just joining the show, we're talking with Mark Glennon. He's the founder and executive editor of Wirepoints. One of the things that J.B. Pritzker likes to talk about is, we've had a lot of credit upgrades, and we have stabilized our economic structure here in the state of Illinois. But a lot of that happened during the COVID years when the federal government was sending gougods of cash. And prior to the invasion that happened amongst the city of Chicago, who's telling the truth? Have we stabilized, and can we continue at this pace that this governor is taking us down this road? Can we continue that?
From purely the government's perspective, there has been some degree of stability added because of what you described, that flush of money from the federal government, and most importantly, all these tax increases that Pritzker has benefited from. And then they include, by the way, that huge income tax increase that happened in the year prior to Pritzker coming into office. So tens of billions of dollars more have been available for Pritzker to work with. Well, of course, you're going to get some stability out of that, but it comes out of the pockets of our people here, and we know what the consequence of that is that in the long term they leave. It takes a while for them to leave. They don't just up and run away. But we've seen the gradual drip of people leaving out, especially taxpayers, which is borne out in the IRS migration numbers, which don't lie, and we've publish them in detail every year when they come out. Tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars of lost adjusted gross income goes with all these people who are leaving, and it is primarily the upper income people who are taking off.
Mark Glennon, my closing question: Are you optimistic that Illinois can still be repaired, or have these political incentives made meaningful reform nearly impossible without a full-blown crisis? And do you think that full-blown crisis is at the door?
I think it's going to have to get a lot worse before it gets better. call it a crisis if you want, that we're going to have to go through because politically the voters haven't reacted to this. The politicians remain intent on simply ignoring the problem. Pritzker actually thinks he can run for president on his economic record. That's what he's doing. They get away with it largely because our press lets them get away with it. So I don't necessarily predict one moment of blow up. I think it's a process, not an explosion, and that process is going to get worse and worse until the electorate finally wakes up, and there's going to be a lot of pain in the process. I view this as an exercise in disaster mitigation, not avoidance. It's going to be a matter of trying to pass things that help the innocent victims, try to get things done like school reform and some fairness in taxation and all the rest. But it's going to get worse.
Oh, my goodness. We got to leave it there. Mark Glennon, founder and executive editor of Wirepoints. Thanks so much for joining us on Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft. I really, really, really appreciate it. And I love what the work you guys are doing at wirepoints.org.
Thanks so much, John. Take care.
All right. That's Mark Glennon, and he joined us on the Alpha Wealth Group Answer Line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer. Don't miss In Grace with Pastor Jim Scudder Jr. Now heard on Sunday mornings at 7:30. Tune in and find hope as Jim Scudder explores God's Word and His world each Sunday morning right here on AM 560.